Boundaries. Everybody's talking about them. Everybody seems to want them. You're looking around the room saying they want boundaries. Hell yeah, I want boundaries too. Psst. Samantha, what are boundaries? Don't worry, I've got you covered. You're about to find out. Welcome! If you're new to my channel, I'm Sam Crow, a life and transformation coach, speaker, writer, mompreneur, and recovering neuroscientist. I'm also founder of Avalia Consulting, a coaching company that aims to spread empowerment, growth, and connection. I made this video for those of you who are interested in learning more about what boundaries are and curious about how to begin setting boundaries. We'll go over 3 things in this video. The first is, what are boundaries? The second is, how do I know if I have work to do on my boundaries? And the third is, how do I kickstart my boundary evolution? So 1, what are boundaries? Your boundaries are your limits and preferences. They dictate what is and what is not okay with you. They also serve as guides for yourself and for others to understand how you want your resources and your well-being to be honored. And when I say well-being and resources, I mean several different things, right? And I think that's important in understanding what boundaries are. So let's start with well-being. Well-being might be your physical well-being. It might be your emotional well-being. It might be your mental or psychological well-being. It might be your spiritual well-being, right? Resources. We tend to think of resources as money, sometimes money and time, and those are resources, right? Very important ones. But resources can include things like your energy, your gifts and talents, right? They can be your space, your physical space, your mental space, your spiritual space. So resources are really, all about that pool of stuff that you sort of treasure, that you want to invest in yourself and those people and things that are most important to you. And so really that's what boundaries are all about, right? They're about honoring your well-being and your resources so that you can give to and be in powerful relationship with the people and opportunities and experiences that matter most to you, that are most aligned to you. So when I think about defining boundaries, I also like to talk a little bit about the role of boundaries. I think that kind of helps frame boundaries. So some of you have heard this before, but when I talk about boundaries and their role, I'm thinking about a couple different things. The first, I think, is that boundaries serve as a compass for compatibility, right? So a compass, tells you which direction north is, which way you should walk, and it's the same thing here. It's really about helping you understand and others understand whether you're compatible. It's a guide for compatibility. Boundaries also serve as an invitation for connection. When you articulate your limits and preferences, your what is and what is not okay with you, you're really helping others understand how they can be in powerful relationships with you. If you're not telling people, hey, here are my limits and preferences, like how can they really know your authentic self? And it's almost like they're set up for failure, because how can they honor your authentic self? Because they just don't know. They're guessing. So that's the first 2, right? So we talked about a compass for compatibility, an invitation for connection. The third thing is the boundaries serve as a protective perimeter. So think about boundaries as a fence with a gate. And when you open the gate, you're saying it's okay to come in, right? You can come into my orchard and pick some apples. When you close it, you're saying, you cannot come in. Or you can come in, but not right now, like come back later. And the fence part really is what a fence is for. It's to keep out those people, those things that you don't want in your orchard, that aren't good for you. And so you can think about it like that, right? It's flexible, you can open it up, but it also can guard those resources. The fourth role of boundaries that might, to me, be the most important is boundaries serve as an essential form of self-care. The health and wellness industry, God bless it, it might have us convinced sometimes that self-care is all about the manicure, the spa visit, taking the day to go to yoga class and have a green smoothie. And all of those things are fine. I mean, I don't do green smoothies, gross, but I know that they're okay for others, right? That those are all fine and important. But true self-care is deeper. It's the difference between a Band-Aid and an organ transplant. True self-care is really digging in and really feeding and nourishing yourself in ways that are sometimes hard, that require some work and time and investment, but the payoff is huge. It multiplies out, not just within you, but to those around you. So boundaries serve as an essential form of self-care. And so that's what boundaries are, and that's the role that boundaries play. And I would say that I think that's what we can cover for today. So the second thing I wanted to talk to you today about is, how do you know you have work to do on your boundaries? I think there's a lot of work when I'm coaching people, we do a lot of work around this, but there are some signs and symptoms that'll flag for you right now because they tend to be the more common symptoms, okay? So one is you feel resentful about things you've committed to doing. It's like, so why did I say yes to this? Why did I agree to do this? So that feeling of resentment around things that you've obliged yourself to do. In line with this, if you find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, or automatically saying yes all the time when you want to say no, either because it's a habit, or because you're afraid of upsetting people, you're afraid they won't like you anymore, they'll be mad at you, you want to avoid conflict, or you're afraid you will be judged by others or a community of others. That automatic yes, that's a really big sign. So another sign is if you feel you are in obligation overwhelm all of the time, just always in that state of obligation overwhelm. Another sign or symptom, you feel often like you don't have the resources, we talked about resources, for the people and things that matter most to you, because those resources are going sort of these like vortexes, these people or these things that are not as high on your priority list. You just can't get to the things that matter because you don't have anything left in the tank. Yeah. So a couple other signs. If you find yourself falling into a role of people pleaser, a role of savior, I come in and I save everything, a role of like the dependable one, the nice one, the kind one, the responsible one, these roles that with them come this almost impossible to get out of obligation of saying yes and committing yourself and giving of yourself to the point that you're blood dry. So if you find yourself in those roles or telling yourself, well, this is who I am, that's a good sign. I think a couple more. If you accept responsibility for things that aren't yours to own. When you say you're sorry all of the time, even though you didn't really do anything, like sorry is a social lubricant. When you try to own others' outcomes, either because you're sort of hyper functioning or over functioning, taking on your piece and their piece too, or because you've entered in a type of like codependent relationship, that's a really good sign that you have some work to do on your boundaries. Maybe last one, because this is a lot, and I'm guessing that most of you have said yes to one of these. If you find yourself in a pattern of relationships that are one-sided, or where the other person is a narcissist or potential sociopath, if this is a pattern for you, then you probably have an issue with boundaries. Statistically speaking, you should not have a majority of your relationships be with a sociopath. Like, that's some really, really bad luck. It might be because you have some work to do on your boundaries. So these are some of the signs and symptoms, and you can use the Google machine to find more, or you can go into a coaching program or whatever. But the point is that if you're not sure whether you have work to do around your boundaries, start looking for signs that you don't have this fence and gate, right? That somebody's in your orchard all the time just taking things. Okay. So we talked about what are boundaries. We talked about how do you know if you have work to do on your boundaries. And the third is, where do you start? The good news is we always start with awareness. So that you are watching this video means that you are already aware that you want something to be different. And you're already aware that perhaps boundaries is an area where you want something to change. And we've talked a little bit about what boundaries are and what are some of the signs. So you've already started, you've already pushed the button in your boundary evolution of adding in new awareness. And so what I want to do for you is to help continue that awareness. And we're going to continue into the I of my boundaries approach, which is identify. You know, to start to set boundaries, you first must know, what are my boundaries and where am I at with them now? So it's sort of like the I part in approach I'll talk to you about at a different time. So what I'm going to leave you with are some I exercises, not like I exercises, that would be awkward and I don't want anyone to like injure themselves, but some exercises in self-awareness that will help build up to the actual identifying of what my boundaries are. Okay, so what are these? First, if you haven't guessed, I want you over the next few weeks to bear witness to yourself, to start noticing your own behaviors regarding your well-being and your resources when you're in relationship with others. And what I want you to look for are times where you say yes when inside you're screaming, or maybe not screaming, well, screaming. No, you know, what do you say yes to when in your mind you're saying no? Or what do you say yes to? But the minute you say yes, you can start to feel sort of that resentment, that like, I have to do this, okay? So that's one thing I want you to look for. Two, I want you to look for situations where you have a limit or preference and you do not communicate it. Like maybe under the guise of, oh, if you're all happy, I'm happy. Like if everyone else is happy, I'm happy. That is a lie. No. Like we tell ourselves that. And like sometimes it's true, but many times we just tell ourselves that because, you know, we self-sabotage. So I want you to look for times where you have a limit or preference and you don't communicate it, okay? It could be as simple as like everyone's going out to eat, they want to eat Chinese food and you hate Chinese food and you're like, totally cool, like I'll totally do it. No, okay, so just pay attention. Okay, number 3, look for situations where you own or take responsibility for things that aren't yours to own. And this one might be hard, and there might be situations where it's easier than others. But look for places where you take on others' work, or you take responsibility for their happiness. You know, parents, there's some boundary work there often with our children. Or you are cleaning up others' messes, either literally or figuratively. Or you saying you're sorry when you've done nothing wrong. Now, I don't necessarily want you to start acting on your boundaries. I mean, you can if you're like, oh, I get it now, I'm just gonna stop doing them. But this really is about raising your awareness about when you're doing these things. And as you're noticing, keep in mind the 3 W's. Who is the person that you are interacting with, right? Like who is the person with whom you're having the relationship that you're noticing these things happening? Because boundaries are always set in the context of another. Okay, that's first W. Where? What is the context? Is it at work? Is it in the community? Is it at home? Like, where is this boundary not being set? Where are these noticings happening? For some of you, it might be in the home. For some of you, it might always be in the office. For some of you, it might be in your community. I see this a lot back to school time, right? Oh my gosh, I have to leave work because I have to volunteer in my kids' class and pick up stuff to make cupcakes for the bake sale, and then I get the whole family to Acme Pizza for the fundraiser, and they're just going crazy, all this stuff. Yes, okay? So it could be anywhere, but where is it happening? So there's the who, there's the where, and then there's the what. And the what is really about what aspect of your well-being or what resource is not being honored in the situation, okay? So you're going to notice 3 things that you say yes to that you want to say no to, limits or preferences that you're not communicating. Third, do we remember the third? taking responsibility for things you don't own, okay? So those three things, notice them, and as you're noticing them, think about the three W's, 3 and 3. The three W's, the who, what, and where, okay? All right, in a later video, a video at a different time, we'll jump into the approach for setting boundaries. But for now, let's just notice so that we can build into the understanding what are, each of us has a unique set of boundaries, what are our boundaries, and where are we at now with them. All right, if you liked this, please make sure you hit subscribe and like so that you will get more of these videos and so that you can continue your evolution along this boundary pathway. Thank you. Till next time.